Hi, in this video we're going to look at task 2 of component 1. So task 2 focuses on design. So we'll look at some examples and then we'll have a look at how to approach this particular task. Now if you look at the mark scheme, you've got 4 mark bands and it's the task 2 interface design. The learning outcomes are understand interface design for individuals and organizations. And the learning outcome B is be able to use project planning techniques to plan, design and develop a user interface. If we look at mark band 4, which is 10 to 12 marks, which is what all of us should be aiming for, it's comprehensive application of relevant user interface design methods and design principles. And you can see that the evidence they require is always fully appropriate consideration of design visualizations, including input or output screens, accurate references made, fully accurate references to the project brief, well-developed initial designs that meet all user requirements. So within here, when we are designing things, we really need to reference the requirements of the project that we identified in task 1, and we also need to reference design principles when we're doing this throughout. In doing so, we will achieve this particular mark band. This is an example of a student's work. This is the distinction work. You can see that this is the introduction or overview slide. This particular learner, what they've done is they've kind of explained where their logo's positioned and how it's going to achieve consistent layout. They've referred to breadcrumbs, which is a design principle that shows where you are in a specific navigational system. They've referenced the navigational buttons they're using, the back and forth. They've talked about the text and images and how they will be positioned in every single screen, how this will achieve consistency. They've talked about their titles, the font size they're going to use, what their normal text is going to be, the font style they're going to use, their color scheme, and then they reference accessibility features as well as how they're going to make use of white space. So my advice is going to be that when you are designing this, have one slide perhaps that kind of will explain this, or if you're not going to have a separate slide, you may have this reference within your design. By when you're using those arrows, you can reference the different bits. So if we look at this example here, they've kind of copied this 4 times, so I've just only provided it once. You can see that in the top left they've got the logo, and this will be positioned in that particular location for all of the screens. They've talked about a title and where that will be positioned, how that's going to be how that will achieve a consistent layout, why the text is bigger. So remember, for title we want the text to be bigger to stand out, so it's easy to identify and is the common place people look for. They've talked about social media icons, where these will be positioned, as well as links to QR codes and hyperlinks. They've referenced information and images according to the project and where they will position these. Do keep a track of this, because in the next slide we will look at some elements that need to be improved within this particular example. They've referenced the accessibility features at the bottom right, but I don't think that's enough. I think they need to perhaps consider some more accessibility features. They've talked about use of white space, so there's enough space between the text and the images. And then they've talked about the navigation features as well. So you can see overall it's consistent. You can see overall they've explained each bit quite clearly. You can see they've referenced even the breadcrumbs as well as an example. So the feedback the moderator gave this particular learner is they've produced a comprehensive application of the relevant user interface design methods and design principles. They're well developed initial designs that fully meet all user requirements. They're fully appropriate consideration of user accessibility and the fully appropriate consideration of design visualization, including both the input or output screens with mostly accurate reference to the project brief. So the learner has produced designs for all 4 screens, so you need to make sure that you don't do design for one screen, you do design for all 4 screens. Even if it's the same design, you just copy it 4 times and it should save you time. The screen designs have consistent buttons and navigation tools, so the buttons and navigations are in the same location for all of them. They're not moving from one screen to another. The only drawback in this case is that the learner has not given detail of which images or social media and accessibility icons, text styles, fonts and colors they intend using. So if they'd included some images here, if they included some icons, the text they're going to use within there, the sample text, that would be really good. And the font style they were going to use, that would have been really good, because they could have shown that as an example. So the learner has considered how the design meets the project brief and the needs of user by keeping all screens consistent with all information in the same place for each screen. There is direct navigation buttons for each of the screens on every slide, as well as screen-to-screen navigation buttons. So how they get from one screen to another. So the learner has not suggested content for each slide. So example, the title they're going to use, what the title is going to be, the images they're going to be using, as we kind of referenced in there. So that is the 2 key bits that I think they've kind of missed from this. So I looked at the specification. I kind of took some key bits of information out as tips that you can use when you're doing your task 2 and also task 3. So think about the colors. So if you're using limited colors, it's going to have a huge impact in terms of how your design is going to look, because limited colors can influence and have a huge impact on your overall design. So we want to make sure that we're not using too many colors where they're clashing with each other. There is this idea of using an organization house style, and if you do that, it's using a set of colors that kind of work well with the business. So in this case, if the gym has a specific color set, you may consider using that. If it's a holiday booking system, you may consider what colors they would use. But traditionally, colors like orange will be used for grabbing user attention, blue is to do with more seriousness, black used for power, and green tends to be used for health, as an example. Now when you design, it's important that you reference the font size you're going to use and give an example of it with some sample writing. The style of font you're going to use is also important, and in your write-up you can mention why you've used that particular font style or size, and something you may want to reference is to do with making sure that it's readable, making sure that we're avoiding decorative font within there, and if it's a screen reading, you may consider using sans serif. The other thing you can reference is when you are providing information, it's providing appropriate information for each screen. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to include too much information in one screen and very little in another. So there needs to be that consistency where appropriate. And you also want to make use of white space within your design. The language that you use needs to be appropriate. So you need to think about who your target audience is, the kind of language you're using. Does that meet their needs? And then your layout needs to be consistent. So consistency means having the logo in the same place, having the navigation in the same place, having your images in the same place, and making effective use of the white space. And then placing things that are really important, really useful in prominent positions. So for example, if you've got something like a search bar, you don't want to put that at the bottom of the page because people tend to use a top-down approach. If you've got navigations, you don't want to put your navigations at the bottom, you want to put that at the top. And making use of breadcrumbs is also an effective strategy for this. With regards to user perception, sometimes we may want to use things like visuals to kind of make things stand out. If we're using any icons for warnings, or we may use some colors. So if a user's filling in a form and it's complete, we may want to provide them with some visuals. If it's complete, it could be a tick, it could be a color change on the screen or color change on the button. But the idea is you want something that's uncluttered, but also a user can easily follow. And then with regards to efficient user interface, within your design, you can reference any shortcuts that you're going to use. Shortcuts, for example, to go from one screen to another. Shortcut that will take you to the home screen. If you're using buttons, maybe making those buttons stand out, making the button bigger, the font size bigger. And again, if we have objects that are a little bit bigger, they kind of stand out. So if you're a user and you're looking for something, if you find that quite quickly, well, it's saving you time, and obviously it's making effective use of the user interface. So hopefully that gives you some ideas in terms of how to approach task 2. To summarize, we need to make sure that we have a consistent layout. We need to make sure we are addressing the accessibility needs. There's several ones, such as text to speech, the ability to resize images and font, use of colors, use of icons, use of different languages. And we need to make sure that we reference the user requirements so that we are showing that we are factoring those in within our design. So hopefully that's useful and is giving you some ideas for task 2.